Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of ThinkerThemer. Today, me and my wonderful fiance Maggie, the Themer, are talking about one of my favorite games, Heaven and Ale. Now, Heaven and Ale is by Michael Kiesling, who is the author of Azul. I can't believe I did that without knocking the other box over. And Andreas Schmidt. And they have come up with a very tight, what I think is easy to learn, but hard to master Euro style game. Now, what are you trying to do, Themer?
Well, in Heaven and Ale, you are the head of an ancient monastery. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to brew the most perfectly heavenly ale. The way you're going to do that is you're going to be needing to make sure that you keep a good balance of all the components, the water, the wood, the yeast, the hops, so that that and your brewmaster skill level and the way that you position your monks will mean that, you'll end up with the absolute single best brew in town.
And the way that you do that is to scrimp and save all of your coins to try and buy resources, because man, this game is tight from a money perspective. It is the single most frustrating thing in this game is you never have enough money to do what you need to do. So how it works is at the center of this game is a rondel. Sidebar. Amy, why do you love rondels so much, I hear you ask? Well, let me tell you, a rondel is a board that has a circuit. And so from your starting point, you are moving around and around and around the same track. Now, what makes that interesting is this is you, and in the game, yes, that's a meeple, in the game, you get to move along each step on the board as fast or as slow as you like. You might take it slowly and move from one space to another, picking up every resource and doing every action along the way. Or you might jump ahead and move from space to space, quickly getting through the circuit and cherry picking all of the very best items along the way. Now, different games implement this in different ways. In Teotihuacan, you have a cluster of workers who you are trying to move around this rondel together in order to slowly move them as a group to maximize the number of resources that you can pick up along the way. In another example, in Great Western Trail, when you're all cowboys, you are moving around a rondel and trying to hit a circuit, an end of the circuit called Kansas City. When you get to Kansas City, you get rewarded by placing stations and getting coins. So it's in your best interest to try and move through that circuit quickly to hit that goal end as many times as possible. But it may also be worthwhile moving slowly through the rondel to optimize your hand before you get to that end point. In this particular game, in Heaven and Ale, what I love about it is that you're moving through a rondel as quickly as you like. There are no number of steps that are the maximum number of steps you can take, but you only get to go around that rondel once per round. And so either you fly through and you pick up all of the most valuable items, such as monks and scoring discs, or you move slowly and you pick up the resource tiles that everybody else has left behind. Now, what I love about rondels is that means you're always got your eye on your competitors. If someone is here, here, and here, you are trying to map out the likely risk and reward for you moving quickly past someone to pick up something that you really want and are not sure if they're going to leave it there for you, versus staying behind and picking up things that others are leaving behind. And for that reason, it creates a real interconnectedness between players and it makes it more fiercely competitive. And that's why I love a rondel.
Amy's favorite thing in the whole wide world.
Look, it is up there with worker placement as one of my favorite mechanics. And what you are doing in this rondel is you are traveling around and you're picking up 3 different types of things: resources, scoring discs, and monks. And you're trying to build out your player board. So for the most part, you are taking resources, and resources are either going to be placed in the shady side of your map or in the sunlit side of your map, the sunny side. And where you place it depends on how it's going to reward you when you activate it. If you place it on the shady side, it will give you coins, which, as I mentioned, incredibly valuable in this game. But Ultimately, you are going to be scored on getting all of your different resource types from one end of the track that they start on through to the top end of the track. And the trick to this game is that you are only as good as the resource that you've left behind. So there are 5 different resources and you're trying to move them all along the same track to get them as close to the end of the track as possible by the end of the game. But you need different types of tiles that relate to that resource activated on the sunny side of your board in order to push each of them along. But the issue is that when you take, for example, this 2 green, if you were to place it on the shady side of your board where it will generate coin, it will only cost you $2 to place it there. If you place it on the sunny side where it will activate your green resource to move twice, it will cost $4. So everything on the sunny side is costing you more, but ultimately it's helping you build an engine to get all of those resources where you need to be by the end of the game. Now, the other important thing about what you're trying to do is you're trying to surround the sheds on your board. When you surround the sheds on your board with 6 different resources or monk tiles, you will be able to activate those, and that's how they generate the money or movement. And so you're constantly running this tension of the 2 sides of your board. You're thinking about, well, how do I surround a shed on the right-hand side or the shady side to generate the money that I need to buy the resources to put on the sunny side to activate and move up my resources. Now, the other interesting thing about this game, I think, is the end game scoring, because I mentioned you need to get all of your resources as far along as possible, but you also have a brewmaster, and a brewmaster will be allowed to move up the track when you have really bad low scoring circles around your sheds, which is like generating you less money or allowing you to move your resources less far.
Yeah.
And so there's this constant tension of, well, I'm going to leave my brewmaster behind if I optimize for more money and more movement of my resources, or should I just do a really terrible job of that and get my brewmaster to move forward? Because at the end game, you're going to be evaluated on where your resources have ended up, and where your brewmaster is going to dictate the multiplication of your score. And I'm not going to go through how this is scored because it is actually quite complex. It's quite strange the way this is scored, but it is very clever. It's messy, but it's exceptionally clever because it introduces that tension in the game of all of these different moving parts. What I love about the Rondel, and I won't go on too much about this, is that the monk tiles are really valuable because they can help your brewmaster move up the track, but they can also be triggered. And when they're triggered, they trigger all of the surrounding tiles, generating you kind of lots of money or lots of movement in your resources. And you want to race to get those. So in the Rondel, it becomes, do I race ahead and grab one of those monks, or do I stay behind and pick up all of the little resource tiles that are being left behind by my opponent? And that, to me, makes for a really interesting, tight game. There are other little objectives that you have to do along the way as well. On the right hand side of your board, you can pick up a scoring tile, which allows you to activate one of these things on the right hand side, so either a resource or a monk, and basically that again triggers what's on your board already to generate the movement or the money. So you can see there are a lot of things going on here. But what I really love about this game, I know you probably don't feel the same, is that it is punishing. Like, it is just, the whole way is just quite an unforgiving game. It is moment to moment, you are scraping together enough coins to buy that next tile, thinking about, okay, then I'm going to trigger something to get me more coins to buy my next tile. And it goes on and on like that. And then you have in the center, and this is just something that we printed out in our 3D printer. So this is not normally on here. You can see underneath the regular board, but this helps keep things organized. There's also a race for objectives. So, someone who has 4 sheds of different types, or the first person to get their brewmaster up onto the last final run or all of their different resources to a similar checkpoint. And so if you can fulfill that first, you're grabbing victory points along the way too. So there's a lot to keep your eye on. But ultimately, I feel like in this game, you're keeping one eye on your opponent in terms of the rondel, but you're also really concerned about your own puzzle and how you're going to get those resources to the end. Because if you don't, you're not going to score well.
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Very difficult. So let's talk about the theme. I actually love the theme idea. I just found it really enjoyable, this concept of the monks that apparently is actually quite based in historical accuracy.
It is, yeah. Apparently we wouldn't have the beer we have today without monks in their monasteries in Europe.
So there you go. So I love that as a concept. I enjoy the pieces and the way it kind of comes together. I still don't get it. Every time I think I have understood what I'm gonna, like how to crack the game, I lose by a long shot. From a theme integration point of view, I feel like it's a bit pasted on, aside from just the fact that you are trying to balance all these different elements. There isn't really any, and obviously all the different elements by color. So you've got the yeast and the wood and the hops and the water. Aside from just the fact that you're matching the colors to the tiles so that you're moving the right resource along, there's no real interaction in between them. It's not like, oh, unless your water level is to this, you can't, this is not going to grow. There's absolutely none of that. It feels like it's a puzzle. It's an interesting puzzle. This whole concept of, if you put things in the shade, they'll give you money. I need to go and try that out. I need to go and plant something in the shade and see if I get
in the shade.
Yeah, so it's like if you plant it in the sun, it's going to grow and give you the resources. Sure, if you plant it in the shade, you get money. Say, what? Let's go do that. We've been missing out our entire lives. What have we been doing?
What have we been doing with our lives?
Exactly. So thematically, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But look, I feel like I have a love-hate relationship with this game because I love the concept of it. It's one of those things that, like, I'm always excited to play it, and then when we're playing, I get so frustrated because it is so tight and so like.
It hurts.
It hurts. Yeah, it actually hurts from a.
In the best.
Not
way.
in a. Oh, this is too difficult. Just in a like there's just not enough resources, or there's not enough money, or there's not enough turns. Like it actually ends. For what you're trying to achieve.
In a 2-player game, it's 3 rounds around the rondel, and that can go quickly if you're racing. But we've played this so many times, and for probably the first half of our experiences playing this game, Maggie would lose quite badly, and I was thinking about why that is, and I'll tell you why that is because. On a rondel, Maggie will be traveling along and then we'll just be like, ooh, piece of candy.
Yeah. I want to collect things along the way.
Ooh.
So that's the other thing. I love the creation. Like I love creating that final, what do you call it, tableau.
Yeah, I know, but there's the thing about a rondel, and this is why I love it so much, is like you have to have one eye on your competition at all times, because if someone else is speeding ahead and picking up all of the great stuff and you're left there just like picking up what's in front of you, you're missing the bigger picture, I think. And so I did point that out to Maggie after beating her several times. And now she is much more competitive in terms of jumping ahead and not allowing me to go ahead and grab everything worthwhile, all the monks and the scoring.
Ironically, thematically, what I was doing wrong is I was being too zen of a monk, just like being present, working on my little piece of land, trying to achieve whatever thing I wanted to achieve, and not thinking enough as the monastery, as the head of the monastery that's like machinating and orchestrating everything and placing the monks and like looking ahead and looking at the competition. Yeah, I was more in just the zen. I'm in the shade, I'm in the sun, I'm going to build these little things.
Well, my monastery is just burying you.
So you got a very competitive monastery.
That's right.
And I'm like, zen.
I've got an army of monks.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're doing over there.
Well, I feel like, I'm just trying to be present and zen and heavenly.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I think...
Like, who's the real winner, at the end of the day? Who gets into heaven, You may have the best beer, but, who's actually going to get into heaven?
Anyway, I feel like this game would suit someone who really likes a tight competitive game. Like ultimately that you can play like Maggie and just cruise along. But ultimately what's going to win you this game is a really careful balance of the placement of those tiles and using your competitive advantage on the rondel. And no game does that better than this, I don't think, in terms of keeping it quite simple. Like you can see there's not a lot of parts to this game. It's not a big setup. It's actually quite simple what you're doing. It's very simple, picking one thing up, placing it on your board. The scoring is a little bit complex, but for most people, I think this would be well within reach. And something that is just always comes to kind of that nail-biting conclusion that I love about who's going to win. And in that last trip around the rondel, are you going to get what you need to get the resources to the end?
Yeah, one thing I didn't like about it though is you can lock yourself out of the game. So I have been in a situation where...
It's punishing.
Yeah, and that sucks because it's one of the things in a Euro game often is that you don't get locked out of the game forever. It's like you still can play and you can kind of have a substandard experience, but not complete. So by being locked out, what I mean was I got to a point where I didn't manage my things well and I ended up being without money and then no other way of generating money, and which then meant that I couldn't get anything else. So the rest of the game I was just like, well, there's nothing I can do.
It's a bit like a splotter game. Like you can get splotted.
I've gotten splottered so many times, and I love splotter games.
Yeah, especially if you don't build your money creation engine first a little bit before you start on the other side. So yeah, it is punishing, but I mean, you just have to do better next time, Maggie. Anyway, that is Heaven and Ale, a game that I absolutely love. And I think if you're a fan of competitive Euros, pick this up and give it a go. It will definitely be staying in our collection, and I will continue to make Maggie play with it and anybody else who will play it with me. If you enjoyed this review, please subscribe to our channel, hit like, and if you love or hate Heaven and Ale, I'd love to hear from you in the comments section. But otherwise, we will see you soon with another review. Thanks, bye.